Chapter 1. Somewhere in the southern region of the Wasteland sits a quiet little town right on the beach named Port Town. Eerie silence creeps through most of the dilapidated streets, except for Charleston Avenue, the first and last street out of Port Town. Two young boys take turns beating a decaying carcass with a stick. Any features that might identify the animal have been beaten away. All that remains is a puddle of blood-stained hair and organ soup. Each boy cheers the other on as he lifts the stick overhead, then violently slams it down. Their parents, several yards away, are loading the remaining belongings into a rust-coated pickup truck. The engine has long since died, and a long-haired ox acts as its replacement. The animal is standing in front of the truck, harnessed and grazing on the last bit of grass protruding from the cracked street. Port Town has seen better days, to say the least. The family is one of only a handful left in this once beautiful seaside community. Even the trees scattered throughout the town have given up hope, sulking about, no longer producing any new greens. The boys screech with each strike. Blood splashes across the striking boy's white shirt. Both are too enthralled with the activity to notice a cloaked traveler entering Port Town. The mother, with a box full of the family's remaining food, stops dead in her tracks at the sight of the figure.
"Tony, Curtis, get over here now!"
the mother whispers furiously. Curtis looks back at his mother, then turns to the entrance and shoves Tony in mid-strike. Tony grunts at his brother, jerking his hand back to retaliate before he sees the terror in Curtis's eyes. He looks back to the figure, now only several yards from them. Dropping the bat, the boys rush to their mother's arms. The figure pays no mind to the four and continues on to the first intersection of the town. He looks down both vacant streets before deciding to continue straight ahead. "Surely there's a bar in this shithole," the cloaked man mutters to himself. The sun, which has been pummeling his back for days, beats on Port Town as if it were an unloved child. He scans the street for any building that looks open, his stomach growling in agreement as he passes the intersection. An old sign standing proudly above the other buildings catches the traveler's eye. He warily makes his way to the rotted building on the corner. He is close enough now to make out the sign. Bart's Place. Inside, the local barkeep tends to his vacant tavern. Meticulously, he wipes away the slightest speck of dust from the bar. His wrinkled hand reaches for a shot of whiskey, raising the tiny glass as he looks up to the lazily revolving ceiling fan.
"For you, Christophe,"
he laments before knocking the stout liquid down his throat. His mind often drifts to his father-in-law Christophe, for it was originally his bar. The old barkeep goes to fill his glass again, remembering the words Christophe said to him before he married Katrina. "I expect the man who has shown such love and devotion to my bar will show the same to my daughter." And the bartender did, all the way to her death some 5 or 6 years ago. He devoted every ounce of his blood and sweat to his family and to this bar. He is preparing to raise the glass again when the hooded figure walks through the double doors. The bartender seems to be somewhat surprised to have a customer. However, he brushes his thin white hair from his brow and gestures the figure over.
"Come on in. We got plenty of liquor if you're thirsty,"
he yells over the squeaking ceiling fans. The cloaked figure walks over to the bar, then takes a seat. He pulls the hood back. The stranger is olive-skinned with deep blue eyes, short, dark hair, and a goatee covering his small chin. He looks to be in his mid-30s, with very few wrinkles across the stranger's face. Though his appearance is youthful, his eyes tell a different tale. He scratches his head and gazes at the old man with his deep blue eyes. "I'll take water." The bartender rends with a gruff chuckle.
"Oh, my boy, that's a scarce commodity in these parts. I got plenty of liquor, though."
"Why not?" the traveler replies.
"I noticed a building right near the beach.
Happen to be a desalinating factory?"
"Yeah. Sadly, it ain't been working for several months now. We're nearing the end of our fresh water. Most people have picked up and headed out into the wasteland to find and settle in new communities."
"I haven't seen many settlements this far south," the traveler says, reaching for a tin under his cloak. He opens it to retrieve a rolled cigarette and lights it. He offers one to the bartender, who declines. The dark-haired man slips the tin back into his breast pocket, then scours for 2 bullets in one of his belt pouches. He places them on the table as payment for the liquor.
Pristine caliber."
The bartender brings the bullet to his left eye, scanning it closely.
"You've traded with the Merchants Guild recently,"
the bartender surmises. He places both in his pants pocket, then reaches for a shot glass. The old man pours it to the brim before sliding it to his only customer.
"That's my top shelf. Enjoy. The name's Bartholomew, by the way."
The patron lifts the glass in thanks and knocks it back in one gulp. He sets the glass back on the counter, then replies, "Rod."
"Nice to meet you, son. Too bad you couldn't be here back in our prime. It was quite the sight."
"How many left in town?" Rod asks as Bartholomew pours another generous serving of the dark liquid into his glass.
"I reckon only a handful of families. The Tristan family, which I'm sure you noticed coming in, are packing up to travel to Midland."
Bartholomew lets out a heavy sigh of regret. He knows Port Town is on its last legs. Nothing lasts, but the old barkeep was hoping to someday pass the bar on to his future son-in-law as his father-in-law did to him. He looks down at the bar, spotting a few more specks of dust. Taking the towel from his shoulder, he wipes them away. Looking back at Rod, Bartholomew contemplates aloud.
"I figure I'll be moving on soon with my daughter Daisy. Maybe venture to Midland as well. It's quite the ways, though."
"Especially on foot. You have a vehicle?" Rod questions Bartholomew as he knocks back the next shot of whiskey.
"I got a van with enough gas that might see me and my daughter to Midland, or at least Creighton Depot. Only thing lacking is ammo."
"You have at least 2. Bartholomew snorts condescendingly.
"Only 2 I got, too. Well, at least I have enough to end me and Daisy's suffering if things get any worse."
"I met a merchant on my way here. Said he was heading north toward Midland. He had plenty of supplies. Said he was sticking east to the sanitarium," Rod says. Bartholomew shivers at the sound of the word and takes another shot of whiskey before miming a cross over his chest.
"Such an evil place. Many travelers speak tales of the sounds echoing out of that godless compound. I suggest you sticking east as well."
The men continue sharing another shot when a slender girl bursts through the swinging doors. She brushes back her long brown hair, fighting against the outside breeze.
"Papa, the ship's back! I can't believe it! It finally came back! You have to come and see!"
The young girl waves frantically for both men to come outside. Bartholomew reluctantly ambles toward his daughter, with Rod following. The mid-afternoon rays beat on them as they venture out of the worn-down bar without a cloud in sight to give them a brief reprieve. The men follow Bartholomew's daughter past the bar and down the crumbling road to an elevated portion overlooking the nearby beach. She points out to the horizon. The men are greeted by the dark silhouette of a ship floating ominously offshore. The girl excitedly claps at the sight of it.
"See? I told you it has returned, Papa. The ferryman will be here tonight. It will take us away from this awful place. Please come with us, Papa. Bobby and I want to leave with you. We can be a family and not worry about this desolate town."
"Stop living in this fantasy, Daisy," Bartholomew snorts. "That ship's nothing but trouble."
"What is it?" Rod questions, lighting another cigarette.
"A ship that will take us to the land of abundance. The Jacobs and Johnson families went on the ship the last time it showed up. Oh, I can't wait to see their smiling faces. The ship has fresh water and food, plenty to go around, a haven from the planewalkers," Daisy says eagerly.
"Hogwash,"
Bartholomew interjects.
"Nothing but heresy, if you ask me."
"Papa, me and Bobby want to go. There's nothing left for us here. Jeremy and Leanne Tristan are leaving with their boys today. That only leaves the Core brothers and us. The Conker family and Mr. Jacob left last night. Please, Papa, we want you to come with us."
"Damn it, girl, I said no. You are not allowed to go. I forbid it. That ship carries with it a dark omen, an aura of ill will."
"Papa, please."
"I said no, and there will be no more talk about it. Now get!"
Bartholomew grabs Daisy by the arm and pushes her to the decrepit saloon. He pauses for a moment and looks out to the beach, then to the horizon, thinking of better times in Port Town. Lost in thoughts of that brief instant in time when hope held its head high around the village, back when all the citizens could feel its loving embrace. Bartholomew's old lungs exhale in a wheezy sigh. He looks back at Rod as the stranger crushes his spent cigarette with a dusty boot. "How long has this been going on?" Rod to the barkeep.
"Let me see here,"
Bartholomew mumbles.
"My guess would be the damn thing has been showing up here and there for several months now. Everyone that's left never returned."
"Maybe the stories are true." Rod looks out to the dark silhouette in the distance. The ship bobs against the horizon, hypnotically moving with the tide. His voice lowers to a suspicious tone. "The ship is taking them to land unscathed by evil. Experience taught me one thing, though. If it's too good to be true, then it probably is."
I agree. The day is starting to slip away. We'd best hunker down for the night. I'll need a hand powering on the spotlights if you care to help."
"Least I could do if you have a spare bed and food," Rod says. The men make their way back to the saloon for several more shots of whiskey, waiting for dusk to come calling. They step out to watch the Tristan family depart with their boys into the Wasteland.
"God have mercy on their souls,"
Bartholomew sighs as he makes the sign of the cross across his chest. "Your daughter seems to think the remaining citizens will take the ferry tonight," Rod says to the barkeep.
"I don't think the Core brothers would leave. We haven't done a head count today, so maybe the damn stubborn girl is right. Maybe we are the last."
Bartholomew points west to a cluster of shoddy-looking beach houses.
"A couple more families reside over there. But I haven't seen them today, now that I think about it. There's no hope left for this town. Maybe it is the end for the old girl."
Bartholomew lets out a hoarse sigh of remorse. Everything he's held dear has gradually slipped through his fingers, and it seems no matter how hard he clenches his fist to hold on to that dream of Port Town, it just slides through. In those last hours of fear and darkness, people will more often than not select the worst choice. The sour taste of consequence hides under the layer of desperation. Rod wipes the sweat from his brow. Bartholomew answers with a snort and pats the traveler on the shoulder.
"Sun's slipping away from us. Best we tend to the lights.
Rod follows the barkeep to the back of the saloon, and the men power on the generators that keep the spotlights running around the perimeter. Bartholomew sees a spotlight flickering just above.
"Give me a boost, will ya?"
he asks Rod. The traveler gives Bartholomew a leg up, and he cautiously ascends to the spotlight. He gives it a few good knocks. The light stubbornly continues to flicker. One more good smack, and the spotlight gives an obedient, steady stream. Bartholomew tilts the light toward the saloon before descending.
"Nasty things hide in the veil of night, and man's only defense is the warmth of light," the bartender says. "Let's get inside. The whiskey is calling our names."
Night blankets the land as Rod lies in his cot smoking a cigarette after enjoying a plate of meat and potatoes. The meal weighs heavy on his stomach. Rod's traveled for about a week on foot, living primarily on thin slices of cured meat and stale pieces of bread. He definitely gorged himself with the meat. Though it wasn't the best tasting, the tenderness of the meat had been a welcome surprise. He props open a small window near the bed to allow the cool breeze to flow. The low hum of the generator relaxes the weary traveler to the point of restless dreams. However, a voice, deep within his mind, speaks. The voice has a condescending tone that rouses the traveler.
"Other than that ox on its last leg, what animals did you see around this shithole of a town?"
Rod replies to himself, "I try not to think about it. It was filling. That's enough for me."
"If you say so, why are we this far south anyway? Isn't the contract for Talun farther north?"
Flicking his spent cigarette out the window, Rod says, "The caravan of mutants was migrating too close for a direct west approach. We can save unneeded bloodshed."
"Always the hero. Would feel great to slaughter some of those filthy abominations."
"We have neither the time nor the supplies," Rod interjects. "We need to finish this contract as quickly as possible."
"Yet you're going the long way around."
The conversation is interrupted by a commotion outside. The withered voice Rod hears is Bartholomew's. Rod leans up and looks out the window as he catches a glimpse of the barkeep gimping after two shadows moving to the pier. His eyes move to the beach, where a small light sways to the rhythm of the wind at the end of the pier.
"The ferryman,"
the voice growls. Rod slips his dusty boots on, then slings his gun belt around his waist. He hastily checks both revolvers as he heads to the door. He longs for his trusty 1911 handguns, but there's a high probability that they'd be lost where he's going. He reassures himself that his belongings are safe with Talun. He descends the stairs to the lower level of the tavern, makes a beeline to the swinging doors, and steps out into the humid night. Rod picks up the pace as he moves toward the wooden steps to the beach and hears whimpering. He gets to the beach and follows the cobblestone path to the dock. The low sob gets closer as Rod continues the trail, coming to the source. It's Bartholomew laying on the ground. He apparently tripped and busted his knee chasing the figures. Rod kneels over to the barkeep. "Are you all right?"
"Yes,"
Bartholomew replies, holding on to his left knee.
"Daisy and that no-good boyfriend of hers is going to take the ferry to the ship. I guess my old age got the better of me this time. My damn knee gave out."
Rod moves Bartholomew's hands and surveys the knee. He applies a bit of pressure to the kneecap, at which point the old man grunts. "Looks like your knee popped out of the socket," Rod surmises. On the count of 3, Rod pushes the joint back into place. The old bartender lets out a horrid yell. The traveler pulls out a red sash from a compartment on his belt, and secures it around the knee. "This should help keep it in place for the time being," Rod says, helping Bartholomew to his feet. The men continue their hunt of the wayward lovers to the dock. The first 15 yards are taken lightly so the bartender can loosen his limbs up before picking up speed. 10 minutes or so pass as the men reach the dock. Unfortunately, the ferryman has already left with his transport.
"Fuck me with fiddlesticks,"
Bartholomew cries out. "Will the ferryman return?" Rod asks.
"Shit, I don't know. I highly doubt we could swim."
As the duo think their mission has come to an end, a glimmer of hope appears behind them. The Core brothers, Draben and Tobin, come walking up to the dock. Instantly, Bartholomew knew the faces. Their father was an old friend. He spent many nights and plenty of coin on the top-shelf whiskey.
"I take it you boys are heading to the ship."
"We sure are," Draben replies with a cackle.
"With father dead and most of the women gone, there's nothing here for us,"
Tobin continues his brother's thought.
"I honestly never thought I'd see you here, Bartholomew. I half expected excavators to find your bones sitting at the bar with an empty bottle of your famous whiskey," says Draben with a laugh. "Daisy and her no-good boyfriend just took the ferry. Do you know if he will return?"
The brothers walk past Bartholomew to the edge of the pier. Tobin produces a knife from his back pocket.
"We sure do."
Without hesitation, Tobin slices his palm with the pocket knife and recites an old phrase, a calling to the ferryman. His voice is monotone as the words leave his lips. "Ferryman, oh ferryman, please send us to the land of fruit and mirth." A dim light shines in the darkness and grows in size as it glides to the men's position. It doesn't take long for the old rowboat to materialize from the black night. All 4 men look upon the cloaked figure in gloomy curiosity. The ferryman stands at the back of the putrefied boat, holding on to the steering oar. The slouched figure is covered in a black cloak. The cloth looks as though it was created with oil, moving with a mind of its own, swaying against the blowing of the wind. The ferryman points to a bucket at the front of the boat. Bartholomew looks at the brothers dumbfounded.
"You gotta pay the toll, old man,"
Tobin responds. Draben walks over to the rusted bucket and drops in 4 silver coins.
"This is the least I can do. Our father was so fond of you. He thought of you as a brother. I'll pay everyone's way to paradise."
Bartholomew, Rod, and Tobin give their thanks to Draben as they board the rickety vessel. The oar creaks and moans as the ferryman shoves off from the pier. A moan is heard as to say, "Go back." The creaks follow up with, "Death ahead." The warnings go unheeded as the boat floats across the Black Sea toward the ship. Each passenger looks toward the stars, deep in their own thoughts. The brothers whisper periodically, with sporadic snickers. Bartholomew sits in silence. All hope goes to find his daughter and to choke the shit out of her boyfriend. Rod keeps his stare fixed on the figure. Nothing about this seems right at all. The hairs on his neck have been erect since the boys called the ferryman. The aura about this figure is dark and malevolent, with an air of primordial energy that has dwelled in this plane of existence for a very long time. He expects a fight once they board the ship. Finding Bartholomew's daughter is the priority, however. For now, Rod waits and lets all the pieces fall into place. All 4 men are in awe as they reach the massive cargo ship. They figured it was big, but could not have fathomed it would be this impressive. The ferryman slows the boat next to a rusted ladder. The dark figure points, gesturing for them to climb. The brothers take point with Bartholomew third and Rod bringing up the rear. The climb takes longer than expected due to Tobin's fear of heights. The skinny lad spends well over 5 minutes clenching the rail when they reach about halfway, having made the mistake of looking down. Draben continues climbing to the top while the other 3 are at a standstill. Bartholomew does his best to coax him to continue. Tobin unenthusiastically agrees and very warily ascends. His pace hastens at the sound of Draben yelling down to them.
"Hurry up, Tobin! The view from here is magnificent!"
All 3 men reach the top, gawking in amazement at the sight of the ship. Many steel containers sit stacked on top of each other near the bow. Their original colors, greens, reds, and oranges, have long since faded. Only the lightest tinge remains. To the men's left sits the house, with the bridge looming unnervingly overhead. Rod catches slight movements, but can't discern the cause. He keeps one eye toward the bridge as they head in its direction. The brothers stay ahead as they walk to another cloaked ferryman standing next to a steel door. Or quite possibly the same one, Rod considers. As they reach the figure, Draben spots a small table to the left of the cloaked entity with a rather large bowl. The bowl is full of purplish liquid, with a wooden goblet resting next to it. With a calm hand, the ferryman points to the bowl. Draben investigates further. A cluster of small glasses is stacked behind the glass bowl of purplish punch.
"I guess we need to take a drink."
Draben moves in closer for a sniff.
"Good, because I'm fucking parched,"
Tobin replies, scurrying over to the table, seizing a glass for himself. Tobin pours a cup and hands it to Draben, who passes it to Bartholomew and then to Rod, continuing until each man holds a drink. Tobin takes the first sip.
"My God, this is delicious. So fruity and sweet."
Draben takes a whiff before consuming the liquid.
"It smells like honey."
Seeing both men enjoy their pick-me-up, Bartholomew takes a cautious smell before moving the cup to his lips. Something blocks his chance for the drink. The old tavern keeper opens his eyes to see Rod's hand.
"Do not drink,"
whispers Rod.
"What? Why not?"
"It's spiked. The aroma may be sweet, but in fact the drink is laced with demon bile. Watch."
Rod reaches into his pants pocket and pulls out a very fine piece of silver. He puts it into the cup and stirs it. A black mist rises from Bartholomew's glass, carrying with it a foul funk. A concoction very reminiscent of rancid fish mixed with sweaty feet. The bartender pulls his head back in disgust.
The silver is reacting to the bile, purging it from the drink as it evaporates into the night air.
Rod shakes the silver piece dry, then slips it back into his pocket. Bartholomew looks in the cup. It's now clear. He takes another whiff, and to his surprise, only the aroma of salt water remains. The shadow of the ferryman casts over the cup of the bartender as the figure encroaches on the 2 men. They both look up into the void of the figure's dark hood. The ferryman points back to the punch. Rod looks past the cloaked shade for the 2 brothers. They are nowhere in sight. No doubt both men were given passage through the door. Rod snatches Bartholomew's cup, tossing both to the ground.
"I think we're going to pass. Thanks," smugly to the ferryman.
A deep, low howl rushes out of the dark hood. The reek of rot crashes into the men's faces. Rod puts his left arm out in front of Bartholomew, guiding them several steps back. The ferryman's presence grows in height, as though the entity has been walking on its knees. Rod pulls out his left revolver and fires a shot into the concealed face. The force knocks the ferryman off his feet. The cloaked fiend lets out an animalistic growl as it steadies itself. 2 fiery ovals pierce through the shaded hood as the demon unsheaths an ebony claymore with a blade as dark as night. Rod directs the bartender to go around and find the brothers and Daisy.
I'll keep the demon occupied."
Bartholomew agrees and moves with haste. He pulls out his other revolver as the demon advances and fires off several quick shots. The cloaked demon dodges each bullet, then leaps at Rod with the dark claymore extending over its head. He dives to the right, narrowly missing as the sword crashes into the ground. In a fluid motion, Rod holsters his right revolver, then pulls out a small vial from one of the compartments on his belt. He brings the clear liquid to his lips. Saying a small prayer, he tosses it at the charging ferryman. The vial disappears into the hood, shattering against the hidden face. The water burns with holy fire, knocking the demon off its course, slamming it into the ground. The demon slides 15 yards and smashes into one of the metal cargo containers. In furious anguish, the ferryman pulls its hood off, forcibly wiping off the cleansing water. The creature turns and glares at the one responsible. Its pale skin is dripping off the creature's ancient, humanoid-looking face. It looks to be a Darwinian link between man and ape, not truly belonging to either. The demon opens its simian mouth and lets out a curdling death howl, then charges the gunslinger once again. The demon charges at Rod like a possessed gorilla, waving its claymore overhead. He points both barrels at the cloaked beast and unleashes a hailstorm of bullets. The demon is agile enough to dodge most of the barrage, but the last 2 bullets graze an arm and a leg, which slows the demon down enough for Rod to anticipate the next attack. The demon rears back with the ebony claymore and swings at Rod. He dives forward into a roll, ending it with a slide underneath the demon. He fires his last bullet into the ferryman's crotch. The bullet rips through the genitals, stopping the demon dead in its tracks. It drops the sword, cupping what little remains of its privates. Rod holsters his revolvers and races to the fallen sword. The demon is in too much pain to notice. He grabs the claymore, then thrusts the blade into the chest of the creature. As the demon is about to erupt in a howl of pain, Rod rips the blade out. In one quick swipe, he severs the head clean from the cloaked body. The head hits the ground and bounces twice before rolling to a stop. The lifeless body falls to the ground. Dark blood gushes from the wound in a thick pool. Rod walks over to the head, which is chanting in an otherworldly language. He plunges the sword into the creature's face, ceasing the hymn. He takes a short reprieve to reload his revolvers. Rod holsters them, then grabs the claymore. He heads to the door just beyond the demonic punch bowl. A small sliver of light slides through the crack of the open door. The noise coming from the room sounds as if a party is taking place. Rod enters. He walks down a small hall and turns left to a set of stairs, still following the distant noise. He descends the staircase to the bottom and walks through another door, the origin of the infernal party. The sight leaves him breathless. It is indeed a party, but not a party any human would ever want to be invited to. Several tables are set in the middle of the room. Rod can only guess that the patrons in the room are from Port Town. Each person is in their own evil process of being devoured by tentacles surrounding the edge of the room. These dark, greenish limbs with hundreds of suckers are attached to people, little by little merging them through the pores of the tentacles. Rod sees Draven attached to one of the suckers, face first, with both hands grasping the thick appendage. He rushes over to pull the man off, but the poor fool is already fastened to the demon. A small voice speaks to Rod from his left. He turns and is greeted by a man who is infused with one of the slimy limbs. The only thing protruding from the demon's tentacle is half his face. His voice gurgles as he speaks. "Kill me." The intoxication of the punch has long since worn off, and by that time the poor bastard is mostly fused to the tentacle. He's had to endure the pain of the demon gradually devouring him. Each hour the man is devoured a little more. Rod pulls his left revolver out, then fires a bullet into the half-face. He looks around the room and euthanizes every human that still draws breath. The ship rumbles with each captive slain. He spots Tobin across the room, attached to a tentacle as well. He's delirious and speaking wildly.
The party is so beautiful. Everyone is in attendance. Faith kinds the heart.
The punch causes a hallucination in its prey, projecting a euphoric sense of peace and tranquility, a festivity amongst friends and loved ones. The truth of the matter is much more sinister. Before Rod can assist the young man, the tentacle retracts through a door on the opposite side, taking poor Tobin with it. Rod spots the last two entangled victims in the far right corner of the room, being violated by several smaller ghoulish feelers. He ends their suffering with a bullet before continuing through the door Tobin was dragged through.
No sign of Bartholomew or Daisy. They must still be alive,
Rod thinks to himself as he moves through the organ-infested passage. He comes to a fork in the next hallway. Calling out to Daisy and Bartholomew, he listens for a reply. Nothing. Rod calls out again. Providence sides with the traveler as a faint voice glides up from the left hallway. He presses onward to the dim sounds. The noises lead Rod down into the belly of the ship and, no doubt, to the beast. He passes 2 rooms before coming to a wide-open area. It looks to be the lower cargo hull. Rod finds the old barkeep and his daughter. A smaller tentacle latched on to Daisy and dragged her here, with Bartholomew fighting the appendage every step of the way. Rod wastes little time and charges to the pair, leaping up and severing the tentacle from the darkness. Daisy comes loose and falls into her father's arms. Rod stands in front of the pair, blocking them from the gloom. "Can you two walk?" They both reply yes as Bartholomew helps his daughter secure footing. "Go back the way you came. You should see a sign on your right that reads Engine Room. I'm going to need you to sabotage it on your way out."
"We can do that. Good luck, Rod."
Bartholomew helps his daughter to the exit. Rod inches closer to the other side of the cargo hull. He's at a disadvantage with the interior taking on a leak. There is standing seawater about 6 inches high, which will slow his movement down if and when the demon strikes. Rod positions himself in the middle of the vacant room with both hands holding the ferryman's claymore. He feels the walls constrict around him. The hull vibrates as the demon speaks in its primordial language. Rod keeps his eyes scanning the entire room, anticipating a strike from one of the demon's tentacles. The sound can only be described as a cracked voice speaking an indiscernible foreign language backward. It almost sounds coherent until you truly try to listen, resulting in the human brain translating it to a mishmash of syllables. The rumbling of the hull subsides as the demon's ramblings cease. Rod replies with a smug tone, "Sorry, I don't speak, asshole." The demon growls at the remark and sends a series of tentacles from Rod's right. He dodges the first 2 appendages and swings the claymore at the third, severing it. Dark blood erupts from the wound as the veiled entity curses the human in its native tongue. Angry and in pain, the demon reveals itself to Rod. Hundreds of crimson eyes emerge from the cargo hull, each one gazing upon the delicious morsel wielding the ebony blade. The rest of the demon's body comes into view. It looks like a massive slug, with a thick layer of greenish-brown saliva coating its body. The demon's mouth is massive, with thousands of razor-sharp teeth, displaying them to invoke fear in its prey. The demon's ploy does not work, however, as Rod stands his ground, awaiting the next onslaught. A humanoid-looking figure comes staggering out of the shadows. The figure's right arm is replaced by one of the demon's tentacles. It's as if the demon is storing the souls of its human prey, then creating a slimy mold of them with its elastic skin. 2 marionette humans slink out from the other side of the hull. The demon puppet master attacks Rod from both sides. He dashes toward the 2 smaller tentacle puppets first. He slices at the first demon, cutting the legs off. The sound that spews out is reminiscent of a giant boil popping, with a gush of dark pus splashing into the water. Rod spins counterclockwise and thrusts the dark blade into the second puppet's chest. He moves the claymore skyward, splitting the demon puppet in half while cleaving the tentacle in two. The slug demon howls from the attacks. The larger tentacle marionette charges in to strike with its massive arm. Rod turns around in time to see the tentacle, now forming into a fist, knocking him square in the chest. He flies backward and splashes into the murky mixture of demon blood and salt water. The sword-wielding wanderer has just enough time to dodge left as another tentacle dives in his direction. The hull shakes as the tentacle pushes through the rust-eaten ship. A geyser of salt water shoots upward as the appendage retracts. Rod gets back to his feet as another tentacle strikes. He can see a face and hands pushing out of the greenish skin as the demon creates another puppet. Rod wastes little time, pulling out one of the revolvers, firing a round at the tentacle puppet. It pops, with blood bursting from the wound. The larger puppet comes up from behind, taking another heavy swing at Rod. He turns, swinging the claymore, but the tentacle grabs him. The slimy fist squeezes Rod, forcing all air from his lungs. The tentacle arm moves over to its wide mouth and positions itself to drop Rod in for a light snack. He is able to wiggle his right hand to his revolver and fires 2 shots through the tentacle, releasing him from the demon's clutches. As he plummets back to the ground, Rod reaches into a compartment on his belt and tosses 2 small incendiary grenades into the slug demon's mouth. As soon as his boots plant on the floor, Rod sprints as fast as he can away from the oncoming sluggish time bomb. In complete agony from the last gunshot, the demon sends out a blitzkrieg of limbs toward its prey. Either by divine karma or dumb luck, 2 explosions erupt in almost immediate succession. The first explosion, from the bartender tampering with the engine, knocks Rod off his feet and sends him flying back toward the razor-sharp mouth of the slug demon. The second explosion is caused by the incendiary grenades ripping the creature in half. The force from the grenades negates the first explosion and sends Rod back in the other direction. He hits the floor and slides to the hall entrance. Rod crawls closer to the doorway and looks back to see that the blast opened a hole in the brittle cargo hull. Just how I planned it. However, the first blast from the engine room created its own hole, and a flood of seawater comes crashing through the entrance. Drenched and cold, Rod fights through the current as he heads for the stairs leading out. The cargo ship moans and shakes as it descends into the ocean. Rod backtracks through the tentacle-laced ship as fast as possible while the vessel rapidly sinks. He's able to exit through the punch bowl door as the bow slings up vertically from the weight of the submerged stern. With some deft footwork and steady hands, Rod is able to dive off the port side of the ship as the salty ocean swallows the last remnants of the menacing ship. All evidence of the demon and its victims are lost to the depths of the ocean floor. Rod comes up for air and is greeted by Bartholomew and Daisy yelling to him about 30 yards inland. He unenthusiastically waves back before swimming for shore. When he makes it to the pier, the old barkeep and his daughter help hoist him out of the ocean.
"Holy shit! You did it, son!"
Bartholomew exclaims. Rod takes a moment to lay on the wooden pier, gazing up at the night sky. He reaches for his tin of cigarettes, only to be greeted with a soggy mess of paper and tobacco.
"I got some rolled tobacco at the house I can give you. The least I can do for all you've done for me and my own."
Rod leans back up and looks at the father and daughter with a heavy sigh. "I'm sorry we couldn't save your boyfriend or anyone else from the village."
No worries, mister. We only dated because we were the last 2 in town. He was nice and all, but just wasn't really my type. I was kinda hoping I'd meet up with a boy I liked before. He left with his family the first time the ship showed up. Casey was his name.
The 3 survivors take a slow stroll back to the saloon. The hum of the generators greets the trio as they enter. They each change into some dry clothes while Bartholomew whips up a quick meal of sautéed potatoes with wild mushroom sauce. The old barkeep is true to his word and hands Rod a box of rolled cigarettes. He takes no time blowing through the first one, along with several shots of whiskey. Daisy sits next to Rod after changing into a nightgown. Bartholomew comes over with a hot plate of food for them.
So, what the shit was that thing? One of those planewalkers?
The barkeep inquires.
Possibly. Seems that a demon possessed some kind of sea creature and grew with its appetite. How it secured a ship with a ferryman is completely beyond me, Rod answers.
It's gone, and that's good enough for me. I just hope they all find peace in the afterlife,
Daisy replies, chowing down on her plate of potatoes.
I guess there are worse things in this life than a watery grave,
Bartholomew finishes. The three finish their dinner, with Rod and Bartholomew treating themselves with several more shots of whiskey before heading off to bed. A new day dawns, and with it, the knowledge that they are the only three citizens left in the quiet town. Bartholomew can only guess that the last two families fled in the night, or were gruesomely snatched by the evil that dwells in the shadows. He likes to believe it's the former, whispering a small prayer to himself for their safe journey. The stubborn bartender gives in and decides to leave with Daisy to search for a new settlement to call home. Rod does the only thing he can and draws Bartholomew a map to the only haven he knows.
Follow the path northeast from here. You'll eventually come to a hidden crack behind a wooded patch. Continue east.
Rod pauses for a moment, showing a hand gesture to both father and daughter, then finishes the statement.
You'll be greeted with a light. Make this hand gesture exactly, and you'll receive safe passage. Just tell them Rod Calaway sent you.
Bartholomew and Daisy thank the traveler once more, gifting him as many rations as he can carry. The three part ways, heading off on their own journey and leaving the small port town by the seaside. Like many others before it, the once quaint little village becomes lost to the dying wasteland.